Rain hammered the rooftops of New York City, washing away the soot and whispers of a restless empire. It was 1779, and beneath the watchful eyes of British sentries, the city pulsed with tension. Every alley, every tavern, every word spoken over ale might be worth a man's life. And on that rain-soaked evening, a letter changed everything. It was found in the gutter near Hanover Square, its ink half faded, its words hurried. To the untrained eye, it seemed meaningless, but to the right hands, it was the voice of treason. Major John Andre, the British spy master, held it close to the candlelight and saw traces of another message. Faint, invisible lines that could only appear when warmed. "Invisible ink," he murmured. He knew at once this was not just any letter. This was the mark of the invisible patriots, the ghosts who haunted his every step, Washington's spies. 2 years earlier, when the war for independence had seemed lost, George Washington realized that muskets and courage alone would not win freedom. His army was freezing, starving, outnumbered. But wars are not only fought on battlefields, they are won in the shadows, where whispers carry more power than bullets. Washington turned to one man, Major Benjamin Tallmadge, a young officer from Connecticut with a mind for secrets and a loyalty that burned like iron. Tallmadge began what history would later call the Culper spy ring. But at that time, it was simply a desperate act of faith. He recruited men and women who could move unnoticed through occupied territory, ordinary souls with extraordinary courage. Among them was Abraham Woodhull, a quiet farmer from Setauket, Long Island. He had no love for war, but he despised oppression. His village was under British control, his neighbors divided between loyalty and rebellion. The Redcoats called him harmless, a man who sold apples and pork to make a living. They never imagined that beneath his calm eyes burned a fire for liberty. Under the code name Samuel Culper, Woodhull became the central figure in a network that stretched from New York City to Washington's headquarters. His mission was simple in words, but deadly in practice. Gather intelligence about British troop movements, naval plans, and political maneuvers, then deliver it across the treacherous waters of Long Island Sound to Tallmadge. He traveled under the pretense of family visits, carrying letters hidden in false-bottomed barrels or stitched beneath the lining of his coat. The messages themselves were written in a strange code of numbers and symbols, and often in invisible ink made from tannin and iron sulfate. Only Washington and Tallmadge could read them once revealed by heat or a special reagent. Each journey was a gamble with death. The British patrols grew sharper, and loyalist spies roamed freely. If Woodhull was caught, there would be no trial, no mercy, only the hangman's rope. Yet week after week he risked everything. "I tremble for fear my life will be taken before I can render my country any service," he once confessed in a hidden note. But courage, he learned, is not the absence of fear. It is the mastery of it. In New York City, Woodhull's most vital contact was a young merchant named Robert Townsend. The world would know him only as Culper Jr. He ran a coffee house that catered to British officers who bragged freely of plans and strategies while sipping his imported brews. Townsend listened, memorized, and wrote. His reports described every ship in the harbor, every regiment's movement, every change in command. He knew which generals quarreled and which merchants supplied the enemy. His handwriting, cautious and small, carried the future of the revolution in every curve of ink. To get those reports to Woodhull and then to Washington, the network relied on an ingenious system of signals. In Setauket, Woodhull's neighbor, Anna Strong, hung laundry on her clothesline in a secret code. A black petticoat meant that the courier, Caleb Brewster, was waiting across the Sound with his whaleboat. The number of handkerchiefs indicated which cove to meet at. Under cover of darkness, Brewster rowed across the cold waters, dodging British patrols, carrying messages sealed in waxed packets, and returning with Washington's replies. Every step was calculated. Every sign could mean life or death. And yet, for nearly 5 years, the Culper Ring operated without ever being fully exposed, the most successful spy network of the Revolution. But their work did not go unnoticed. Major John Andre, who had built the British intelligence service into a ruthless machine, began to see a pattern in intercepted communications. He suspected there was a ring of spies operating out of Setauket and New York. Reports reached him of a farmer who traveled too often, of a merchant too quiet to be trusted. His curiosity turned into obsession. The more he searched, the more he realized these patriots were not amateurs. Their codes were unlike anything seen before. Layers of ciphers, invisible writing, and complex number systems tied to a codebook only they possessed. Andre vowed to find them, even as his own fate slowly drew toward tragedy. Meanwhile, Washington waited anxiously in his tent at New Windsor, poring over Culper letters by candlelight. These scraps of paper carried hope, warnings of British attacks, news of reinforcements, rumors of betrayal. From them, Washington learned of the British plan to flood America with counterfeit currency, an effort that could have crushed the fragile economy. The Culper spies exposed it in time, saving the new nation from collapse. They also uncovered that General Benedict Arnold, once a hero of Saratoga, was growing bitter and resentful. His name would soon become synonymous with treason, but long before the world knew, Washington's invisible patriots had seen the signs. Woodhull's nerves began to unravel. He was followed in the streets of New York, questioned by redcoats, and once nearly arrested by a British officer who mistook him for a smuggler. He wrote less frequently, growing paranoid. But Talmadge urged him to continue, reminding him that their work might decide the fate of millions yet unborn. One evening, while meeting Townsend in the corner of a dim coffeehouse, Woodhull overheard officers boasting that the British planned to move their fleet north to trap Washington on the Hudson. That intelligence, if true, could end the revolution. Townsend hurriedly recorded it and passed it to Woodhull, who set out that night for Setauket through storm and darkness. The wind howled. His small boat nearly capsized. When he reached shore, drenched and trembling, he placed the letter into Brewster's hands, the same letter that later slipped into a British soldier's grasp after the storm. That mistake nearly destroyed everything. Andre's men traced the letter's origin, arresting couriers, raiding taverns, interrogating farmers. But the Culper code was too strong. The British could read words but not meanings. The ink disappeared, the names were false, the truth remained hidden. Washington received the warning in time, repositioned his army, and foiled the British movement, a silent victory born of shadows. As the war dragged on, the Culper ring continued to weave its invisible threads. Townsend's reports grew more daring. Woodhull's nerves frayed further. Anna Strong risked her life each time she hung her coated laundry, and Caleb Brewster's oars were worn smooth from countless midnight crossings. Yet none sought glory, none revealed their names. Even Washington never met most of them face to face. Their secrecy was their armor. When peace finally came in 1783 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, the Culper spies simply disappeared back into ordinary life. Woodhull returned to his farm. Townsend kept his shop. Anna Strong raised her children. Talmadge remained silent about their deeds for decades. Their names were forgotten, buried under the louder tales of generals and battles. It was only generations later, when dusty letters surfaced in family trunks and faded ink revealed invisible words, that America rediscovered its invisible patriots. They had fought not with muskets or bayonets, but with pens and code books, risking everything in the quiet conviction that truth could build a nation. Major John Andre was not so lucky. In 1780, caught in disguise during Benedict Arnold's plot to surrender West Point, Andre was hanged as a spy. As he stood before the gallows, he faced his captors with grace, remarking only, "I die for honor." Washington, though grim, respected him deeply. In a letter he wrote, Andre met his fate with that fortitude which becomes a man of honor. Yet, in his heart, Washington knew that the invisible patriots had once again outplayed the empire. History would remember the battles, the declarations, the fireworks of victory. But beneath it all, unseen and uncelebrated, were the men and women who carried the revolution on scraps of paper through enemy lines. Their courage lived not in the roar of cannon fire, but in the silence of secrets kept. And so the rain fell again over New York, the same streets where it all began. where a single letter once slipped from a soldier's grasp and nearly changed the course of freedom. Perhaps, somewhere in that city, another letter still lies forgotten, its words invisible until warmed by time, waiting to tell the world once more that liberty was not just won, it was spied into being. The years that followed the first whispers of independence turned darker and colder. New York remained a city divided, half a fortress, half a cage. Redcoats filled every street, their boots echoing through taverns and alleyways, while hungry eyes watched from behind shuttered windows. Somewhere among the noise, a quiet revolution was still unfolding. One fought not by armies, but by those who hid in plain sight. Abraham Woodhull could no longer sleep. The nightmares came often now, of soldiers bursting through his door, of ropes tightening around his neck. He lived under constant suspicion, pretending to be loyal to the crown while carrying the rebellion's heart in his coat pocket. Each night he burned his drafts, memorized ciphers by candlelight, and prayed that the sea would never betray him. Even his own family didn't know the truth. Sometimes, as he walked his farm at dawn, he would imagine what freedom might look like. Would there be peace? Or just new men in uniforms replacing the old? But he knew he couldn't stop. He had seen too much. The cruelty of occupation, the arrogance of the officers, the despair of neighbors who had lost everything. The war had already taken his innocence. He wouldn't let it take his country. Across the water in New York, Robert Townsend lived an equally dangerous double life. By day, he was a mild-mannered merchant who kept his accounts neat and his manners finer. By night, he was the ear of the revolution. His shop, Rivington's Coffee House, had become a gathering place for British officers and loyalists. They trusted him because he listened more than he spoke. He remembered every drunken boast, every careless remark about orders or supply routes, every rumor that drifted from the mouths of generals. What no one knew was that Townsend's loyalty to the American cause came from something deeper than politics. He had seen the war's cruelty firsthand. The arrests, the hangings, the suffering of civilians. His own father had once been humiliated by British troops in Oyster Bay. Townsend never forgot that day. To him, every coded word he wrote was a quiet act of revenge. He kept his notes hidden behind false walls, in the backs of drawers, or between the pages of his ledger. When enough information was gathered, he composed his reports in the cipher system devised by Talmadge, numbers replacing words, invisible ink hiding the truth beneath the surface. Then, the message would be smuggled out by couriers, often through the hands of brave women who were never suspected. One of them, known only by the code name 355, became a legend. Her real identity remains uncertain even today. Some historians believe she was a member of a prominent loyalist family, others that she was a servant who overheard too much. But what is known is that she provided intelligence from the highest circles of British command, and that she paid the ultimate price for it. Arrested in 1780, she was reportedly imprisoned aboard a British ship in New York Harbor and never seen again. Her sacrifice haunted the Culper spies forever. For Washington, every letter from the ring was a lifeline. He would read them slowly, sometimes twice, sometimes aloud. They contained warnings of ambushes, details of British troop strength, even hints about secret negotiations in London. Yet he could never reveal the names behind those words. He once wrote in a private note to Talmadge, "I can scarcely imagine a more dangerous service." He was right. In late 1779, the ring uncovered something astonishing. The British were planning to send an expedition south to capture Charleston, South Carolina. This was not rumor, but fact, confirmed through Townsend's reports. Washington immediately adjusted his strategy, moving supplies and troops in anticipation. When Charleston fell months later, the Americans were not surprised. They were ready. The intelligence had saved countless lives. Still, the danger grew. British counterintelligence had become ruthless. Major Andre's men interrogated farmers, searched taverns, and even intercepted boats crossing the Sound. Woodhull's nerves frayed. Once he was detained by British soldiers who demanded to see his papers. He lied, claiming he was visiting family. They searched his cart but found only produce. His heart hammered as they walked away. Inside one barrel, hidden beneath layers of onions, lay a sealed message for Washington. Talmadge, ever the strategist, began devising new ways to protect the network. He created dead drops, secret places where messages could be hidden without direct contact. A hollow tree stump outside Setauket became one such place. Brewster would leave packets there at night, and Woodhull would retrieve them by dawn. Sometimes a simple pin stuck into a fence post was the signal that a new message had arrived. But no system is perfect. On one bitter night in December, a courier named Austin Rowe, one of the ring's most daring riders, was nearly captured. British troops stopped him on the road, demanding to inspect his saddlebag. They found only bills of sale and receipts. What they didn't know was that the secret message was sewn into the lining of his boot. Rowe smiled calmly and offered them a drink from his flask before continuing his journey. Washington received that message 3 days later. It contained the first report that General Clinton was considering a plan to invade the Hudson Valley again. By 1780, the tide of war was slowly turning, but so were the tempers within the British command. Tensions and arrogance bred mistakes. Major Andre, ambitious and charming, found himself entangled in one of history's greatest betrayals, his secret correspondence with Benedict Arnold. Arnold had once been the hero of Saratoga, brave and brilliant, but pride had turned him bitter. Feeling overlooked and insulted, he began secret talks with the British, offering to surrender West Point, a key fortress on the Hudson, in exchange for money and rank. The arrangement was made through coded letters delivered by Andre himself. What neither man knew was that the Culper ring had already intercepted whispers of Arnold's discontent. Townsend's reports hinted that a high-ranking American officer was displeased and seeking reconciliation with the Crown. When Andre was captured near Tarrytown, carrying incriminating documents hidden in his boot, the pieces fell together. The spy who had once hunted Washington's agents was now the hunted himself. Washington faced the hardest decision of his life. He respected Andre, admired his courage, even his manners. But the law was clear. Andre was a spy caught in disguise. He was executed on October 2, 1780. Washington wept privately that night. The revolution had claimed another soul. After Andre's death, the British intelligence network in New York faltered. Distrust spread through the ranks. Officers whispered of invisible enemies and cursed the American ghosts, who always seemed to know their next move. Washington's secret army of civilians had outwitted the empire, but the cost was immense. Woodhull's health deteriorated from stress. Townsend nearly broke down under the strain of secrecy. Brewster's hands were permanently scarred from icy oars, and Anna Strong lived with the constant fear that her coded laundry would one day betray her. Yet none spoke a word. They kept their silence through victory and through peace. When the British finally evacuated New York in 1783, the city erupted in celebration. Fireworks lit the harbor where once the enemy's ships had anchored. Washington rode in triumph through cheering crowds. But in Setauket, no celebration broke the night. Abraham Woodhull stood quietly on his porch, staring across the dark sound, thinking of those who had never returned. The ghosts of the war were not only soldiers, they were the unseen, the unacknowledged, the invisible patriots whose work would never be sung in parades. Years later, when Talmadge wrote his memoirs, he mentioned the ring only briefly, never naming the agents. Their fidelity and secrecy, he wrote, were so extraordinary that their identities remained unknown even to those who benefited most from their service. It wasn't until long after their deaths that historians uncovered the coded letters and invisible ink, the messages that had crossed oceans of danger to keep the dream of liberty alive. Today, those letters are preserved, brown with age, fragile as breath, in archives and museums. When exposed to heat, the hidden words still emerge. General Washington must be informed at once. They are reminders that the birth of the United States was not only one with battles and declarations, but with secrets whispered in candlelight, courage hidden behind ordinary faces, and letters written in ink that only freedom could reveal. The revolution, it turned out, was fought as much in silence as in thunder. And it was the silent men and women of the Culper ring who ensured that liberty would not remain an invisible dream. Peace had finally come. But for many, it brought no peace at all. The Redcoats had left New York Harbor in November 1783, their ships vanishing into the gray Atlantic mist. Cannon fire echoed in celebration across the city, but for those who had lived in the shadows, spies, couriers, double agents, the cheers sounded strange. They were free, yes, but invisible once again. Abraham Woodhull returned to his farm in Setauket. The soil felt the same beneath his hands, but he was not the same man. The years of secrecy had carved deep lines into his face, his once dark hair now threaded with white. He spoke little of the war. When neighbors asked, he only said, "We all did what we had to do." His wife, Mary, sometimes caught him staring at the horizon as if still waiting for a signal across the sound. At night, when the world was quiet, he would light a small candle and take out an old wooden box hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside were pieces of a vanished life, a quill stained with invisible ink, scraps of cipher paper, and a small medal Washington had sent him in gratitude, unsigned and unmarked. He ran his fingers over the medal and whispered a prayer not for glory, but for peace.